Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we are continuing our first look at the forthcoming Pan-Asian light cruiser line. Let's take a look today at Tier VIII's Harbin. Now, Harbin is named after a city in northern China, probably China's northernmost major city, if we're honest, farther north than Vladivostok. One of those quirks of geography, a lot of people don't realize how far north China really does extend over there on the the Pacific coast of the Asian continent. But Harbin comes in flying the flag of the People's Liberation Army Navy. Yes, I realize the ridiculousness of the name, but that's what they call themselves. So we're flying the flag of the PLAN here. Now, Harbin is very clearly a Soviet design. I was unable to find in my little bit of research what kind of project the cruiser was based on, because remember, Soviet ship designs, Russian ship names, or ship designs tended to be grouped by project. They didn't project this, project that, right? I couldn't find one for this ship. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means the info might not be publicly available, or at least widely disseminated outside of Russia. We know that the guys, the dev team in St. Petersburg has access to the Soviet archives there, the Soviet naval archives that most of us in the West don't have. So it's entirely possible this was a real design. It's also equally possible this is made up fantasy. I have no idea. I leave it to you to judge. But it's very clearly a Soviet design. So let's have a look around the ship. We're going to talk about some things. Tier 8 is a very, very, very busy tier for cruisers. You realize there are now nearly 30 Tier 8 cruisers in World of Warships. 18 of those are premium. Harbin will join the game as the 11th Tech Tree Tier 8 cruiser. So she's got a lot of really strong competition in this tier. So let's see what we can discern from the numbers and see where she compares. Starting as we do, survivability, 26,500 hit points. This is laughable. This is laughable. This is like worst in tier by a wide margin. This is only 100 more hit points than Chumpond has down at tier 7. And I've moved up to a world where I see Yamatos. What in the hell is happening? This is terrible. This is terrible. This is 10,000 less health than Edinburgh, which is already pretty fragile and on the low end of health, right? So, yeah, right now, Harbin runs away like wildly with worst in-tier health pool. I can't understand what the thought process is right now. The next ship up the line that has a health pool this bad is Ochakov, and Ochakov still has 4,000 more health than Harbin. What? I got no idea what's going on here. I cannot imagine that this number will survive testing. This ship has to have more health than this when it goes live, or this is probably going to be the low point of the line. It's pretty bad. You see there, 25% torpedo protection. Don't get excited. Wargaming has already announced that that's a bug or an error and will be changed. It should be 4%. As I said in an earlier video, no cruiser in this line will have more than 4% torpedo protection. That is just the way it is. Now, with this little health, does she have any armor? Nah, not really. You wouldn't expect much, right? We're looking at 16mm extremities and a 100mm belt. That's basically it. You're done now. This is like kind of, if you made me pick something that's similar, Kutuzov is kind of similar to this, right? The Project 68 BIS cruisers, Kutuzov, Chapayev, well, Chapayev is 68, but Kutuzov and Irian, excuse me, are similar to this. They have 100mm belts. Let's see. She shouldn't have anything fancy going on with her Citadel. Nope, she doesn't. It does sit decently above the waterline. It's quite long, right? So this is a ship that should be reliably Citadeled by most battleships she's going to face when she flashes them her soft bits. So nothing to get excited about right there. Maneuverability and concealment. Well, all right, so she has low HP and she's weak in armor. Well, that's the whole line, but does she make up for it somewhere else? Well, a little bit. She's 33.5 knots there on speed. That's pretty respectable. One thing about Tier 8, there are quite a number of cruisers on the low end of this number, 32-ish, 31, right? But there's also a non-zero number of cruisers that are well above this number. So I'd say she's maybe slightly below average for speed, but not so much that it's going to cost her problems. Now, where I really think is interesting, look at her overall length, right? Like, this is a fairly long and skinny ship. Soviet cruiser designs tended to be this way. Again, I'm looking at you, Kutuzov and Irian and Chapayev. But this ship has a much better turning radius than most of those. 660 meter on the turning circle is even 100 meters better than Kutuzov. But what's more interesting is that rudder shift. 6.9. One of the things that I think people underestimate about Kutuzov when you fight one is how maneuverable the damn thing is. Even I forget how maneuverable she is. I had a video that posted, I think, earlier this week or late last week where I played a Kutuzov and I was dodging shells like crazy because I forget how good that rudder shift is. Harbin's rudder shift here is actually a little worse, but like it's less than half a second. So her handling, she's going to handle like a Kutuzov, which honestly, as far as I'm concerned, is a huge plus. She's going to need that. She's really going to need that with this health pool. So that's definitely a feather in her cap. I feel like this ship's going to maneuver very, very well. Unfortunately, she's not that stealthy. You see their 12-kilometer detection on the surface. A full stealth rig Harbin will get her down to a 9.4 surface detection. Now, that's not bad, but it's not amazing. Okay, there are many cruisers in this tier that beat this out. Belfast 43, Edinburgh, Cleveland, which will eat this thing for breakfast, by the way. Otago, what else? Dzevin Provincia, right? So Ochakov, we talked about Ochakov earlier. So and some of these ships are not like Ochakov is pretty rare, but Cleveland's are not that rare. Okay, so again, and oh, by the way, Cleveland also has like 10,000 more HP than this, like 12,000 more HP. It's lunacy. It's lunacy. You are so outclassed by some of the other tech tree light cruisers. It is absolutely comical. They I can't harp enough on how bad this health pool is. I cannot believe they would release this ship with this health pool. Keep an eye on the dev blog. That's got to change. But yeah, her stealth is nice, but you cannot rely on it. It will not save her. Okay. There's a lot of competition. And of course, now you're also, remember, Tier 8, you're going to start seeing more and more of that glorious 12-kilometer Soviet radar, right? Stalingrad, Petropavlovsk, Nevsky, Riga, Kronstadt, Chapayev, right? So, yay, 9.4 detection, but boo, 12-kilometer radar on a ship that only has 26,000 HP. Yikes. Now, what are we getting for all this? Like with those, I've really harped on the negatives so far. What are we getting in exchange? Well, Harbin is a true light cruiser. Okay, this is as you look at this ship, you almost think this is like the Soviet answer to a Dido or an Atlanta. Okay, because these are destroyer guns. Harbin's main battery is made up of 5 double-barreled 130 millimeter 50 caliber turrets. Now these are not the same guns that you would find on some of the high-tier Soviet destroyers, like Udaloy, for example. The nearest analogy we have in the game right now, these are Kiev guns, which is the only other ship that I could find that had 130 millimeter twin-barreled 50 caliber turrets. Now, these turrets are not the same as Kiev, but the gun caliber is the same. I checked the shell ballistics; they look to be basically identical. So, if you want to get a sense of what these guns fire like, go play your Kiev, okay? My buddy Lord Zath loves Kiev. He's probably really excited about having all of these guns. The trouble is the hull they're attached to. Yikes, okay? 5.3 seconds reload there. 13, yikes, kilometer main battery range. Absolutely horrible. Now, you're seeing 13 in port. They've already buffed this to 13.5. So the port stat you're seeing there is wrong. But 13.5 is still terrible. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. It's like almost 2 kilometers worse than most other cruisers in this matchmaking bracket. So lots of disadvantages to overcome in this ship. From a DPS perspective, let's have a quick check because I want to know Harbin. I'm looking at the AP DPM. AP DPM is actually really good. And I'm sorry, that's Irian. Okay, there's the AP DPM. Yeah, that's still not bad. So AP damage-wise, this ship is probably in the upper echelons, right? She's going to be below Irian, below Kutuzov, below something like a Mines, obviously, but very, very competitive in terms of DPS. HE, similar. Yeah, the HE DPS is also going to be, the DPM, I should say, very, very similar. Not quite best in tier. I'm looking at Cleveland still running away with that category. But honestly, you're not that far behind Cleveland in terms of DPM. So that's a nice place to be. Like, you have a lot of firepower, but once you start to exercise it and people spot you, you may not be around very long. You got to be very, very, very frosty. What else we got going on in the hull offensively? Well, we've got torpedo launchers, 2 triples on each side. These are deep water torpedoes, as we've been seeing up the line. You see their 10-kilometer range. Let me check and make sure that's that's held through testing. No, they've already upped these to 11. So these are now, yeah, it goes to 11. These are now 11-kilometer torpedoes, despite what the port says. That's the only stat they changed, though. You're still looking at 62 knots, 0.8 detection, and 18K alpha hit. Again, like you see with most of the deepwater torpedoes, you're giving the opponent about 5 seconds of reaction time or less, depending on your particular mods. The reload time there, nothing to get really excited about. Over 2 minutes. Over 2 minutes. And you're probably not going to buff the torpedo reload skill on this ship. However, there's a valid case for it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I feel like there is a valid argument to be made for spending some points on the torpedo armament of these cruisers. You know, we've got those torpedo skills in the commander skill tree, right? And most cruiser captains don't use them. The occasional Japanese cruiser captain probably would reach for one of those. You know, I'm looking at you, Miyoko or Zhao or something like that, right? But on these ships, certainly as we get up into the upper echelons, you start to get some really good range on these deepwater torpedoes. I feel like there's a valid case to be made for investing a point or two into some of those skills. More notably the reload, right? Not necessarily the speed or the damage one, but the reload. I think the reload could be a good one. Depth charge wise, she does have some depth charge racks back here at the stern. 2 charges, 12 bombs, 1,700 a pop. Doesn't feel all that amazing. Again, I'm going to keep harping on right now. These bombs, these depth charges don't seem to do enough damage to submarines. And if you're going to take this thing over a sub and get shot at by God and everybody, you should be rewarded with basically, almost a guaranteed kill on that guy unless you really screw up. But she does have depth charges, so those are available. AA defense, something that the ship is actually not too bad at, not amazing. We're not talking about best in tier AA here, okay? 4 flak puffs there out to 6 kilometers. The range is really good. And the 4 flak puffs is maybe a little below average, but still respectable. And of course, you can play around and buff that with some commander skill points and so on and so forth. Outer bubble continuous damage, not very good. Mid-range continuous bubble damage, quite solid. 252, right? 252. Now, that's not best in tier in a world where Diseva Provincia exists. Like that ship makes battleship mid-range auras look weak. Okay, but 252 is very competitive. You're right up there with. I'm looking down the line here. Kutuzov, with Congress, with Bayard, with Prince Eugen, with Irian. So there's a lot of ships in this 250-ish and change range when it comes to mid-range AA tier 8, and you're going to get some good work out of these AA guns if she finds herself under attack. And of course, close range aura there, you got it. So all in, like the AA suite is not amazing, but it's stout enough that when you push your defensive fire button, and of course, you do have your defensive fire button, the enemy carrier is going to know he's been in a fight. So that's nice to see. Consumables-wise, we're looking at the same 3 we've been seeing up to this point, the last couple of tiers, right? Obviously, we're a ship in World of Warships. We get damage control party. We're getting the Pan-Asian smoke, 70-second dispersion time, 100-second reload time, and then we're getting defensive fire. So none of this has changed. What we are adding into the mix, and why I was talking about the torpedo reload skills earlier, is that now I get the torpedo reload booster consumable. This is interesting on a cruiser. Previously, we've only really seen this on, I think, Irian and maybe a couple other cruisers. Irian's the one I know. Irian's where they introduced it, and I feel like maybe Huang He can do it. I'm not sure. There's a handful of cruisers in the game that have this skill. Ordinarily, I look at this skill and go, meh. However, I've played Irian enough to know that those, the deepwater torpedoes, the reload booster, you can do some real work with those torpedoes, and people forget that you have them. And the deep waters mean they're a little harder to detect, right? It's, somebody with sonar has to pick them up. If a destroyer drives right over them, you might see them. So if you're in a position where you're getting pushed, you're kiting, or you're trying to keep somebody out of your smoke cloud, possible. So there are possibilities here. So again, it's not going to make or break this ship, but it's another tool in her arsenal that gives her something that many other cruisers in this matchmaking bracket don't have access to. So anyway, guys, there's our first look at Harbin. I am really down on this health pool. I feel like the health pool is a complete non-starter for this ship right now. If they adjust the health pool, even if they bring her up to like Ochakov levels, maybe even tweak the detection a little bit, bring her up to maybe 30, 31,000 health, maybe give her another 0.2 of a point in detection, like get a little bit more stealth, I think she's going to be in a better place. Then again, this is this is the voice of someone who hasn't played the ship, but on paper, right now, Harbin looks like an extreme challenge to play in World of Warships. In the meantime, guys, appreciate you watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Wash your hands, be safe. I will catch you next time.